passages 1 through 5 of Reflections on the Formation and Distribution of Wealth by Anne Robert-Jacques Turgot, translated by Nicolas de Condorcet. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. 1. The impossibility of the existence of commerce upon the supposition of an equal division of lands, where every man should possess only what is necessary for his own support. If the land was divided among all the inhabitants of a country, so that each of them possessed precisely the quantity necessary for his support and nothing more, it is evident that all of them being equal, no one would work for another. Neither would any of them possess wherewith to pay another for his labor. For each person having only such a quantity of land as was necessary to produce a subsistence would consume all he should gather, and would not have anything to give in exchange for the labor of others. 2. The above hypothesis neither has existed nor could continue. The diversity of soils and multiplicity of wants compel an exchange of the productions of the earth against other productions. This hypothesis never can have existed, because the earth has been cultivated before it has been divided, the cultivation itself having been the only motive for a division, and for that law which secures to everyone his property. For the first persons who have employed themselves in cultivation have probably worked as much land as their strength would permit, and consequently more than was necessary for their own nourishment. If this state could have existed, it could not possibly be durable. Each one gathering from his field only a subsistence, and not having wherewith to pay others for their labor, would not be enabled to supply his other wants of lodging, clothing, etc., except by the labor of his hands, which would be nearly impossible, as every soil does not produce every material. The man whose land was only fit to produce grain, and would neither bring forth cotton or flax, would want linen to clothe him. Another would have ground proper for cotton, which would not yield grain. One would want wood for his fire, and another be destitute of corn to support him. Experience would soon teach everyone what species of productions his land was best adapted to, and he would confine himself to the cultivation of it, in order to procure himself those things he stood in need of, by an exchange with his neighbors, who, having on their part acquired the same experience, would have cultivated those productions which were best suited to their fields, and would have abandoned the cultivation of any other. 3. The productions of the earth require long and difficult preparations before they are rendered fit to supply the wants of men. The productions which the earth supplies to satisfy the different wants of man will not, for the most part, administer to those wants in the state nature affords them. It is necessary they should undergo different operations and be prepared by art. Wheat must be converted into flour, then into bread. Hides must be dressed or tanned. Wool and cotton must be spun. Silk must be taken from the cod. Hemp and flax must be soaked, peeled, spun, and wove into different textures, then cut and sewed together again to make garments, etc. If the same man who cultivates on his own land these different articles, and who raises them to supply his wants, was obliged to perform all the intermediate operations himself, it is certain he would succeed very badly. The greater part of these preparations require care, attention, and a long experience, all which are only to be acquired by progressive labor, and that on a great quantity of materials. Let us refer, for example, to the preparation of hides. What laborer can pursue all the particular things necessary to those operations, which continue several months, sometimes several years? If he is able to do it, can he do it with a single hide? implied, what a loss of time, of room, and of materials, which might be employed either at the same time or successively to tan a large quantity of skins. But should he even succeed in manning a single skin and wants one pair of shoes, what will he do with the remainder? Will he kill an ox to make this pair of shoes? Will he cut down a tree to make a pair of wooden shoes? We may say the same thing of every other want of every other man, who, if he was reduced to his field and the labor of his own hands, would waste much time, take much trouble, be very badly equipped in every respect, and would also cultivate his lands very ill. 4. The necessity of these preparations bring on the exchange of productions for labor. The same motive which has established the exchange of commodity for commodity between the cultivators of land of different natures has also necessarily brought on the exchange of commodities for labor between the cultivators and another portion of society, who shall have preferred the occupation of preparing and completing the productions of the earth to the cultivation of it. Everyone profits by this arrangement, for everyone attaching himself to a peculiar species of labor succeeds much better therein. The husbandman draws from his field the greatest quantity it is able to produce, and procures to himself with greater facility all the other objects of his wants by an exchange of his superflux than he could have done by his own labor. The shoemaker, by making shoes for the husbandman, secures to himself a portion of the harvest of the latter. Every workman labors for the wants of the workmen of every other trade, who on their side toil also for him. 5. Preeminence of the husbandman who produces over the artificer who prepares. The husbandman is the first mover in the circulation of labor. It is he who causes the earth to produce the wages of every artificer. It must, however, be observed that the husbandman, furnishing everyone with the most important and the most considerable objects of their consumption, I mean their food and the materials of almost all manufacturers, has the advantage of a greater degree of independence. His labor among the different species of labor, appropriated to the different members of society, supports the same preeminence and priority as the procuring of food did among the different works he was obliged in his solitary state to employ himself in order to minister to his wants of every kind. This is not a preeminence of honor or of dignity, but of physical necessity. The husbandman can, generally speaking, subsist without the labor of other workmen, but no other workman can labor if the husbandman does not provide him wherewith to exist. It is this circulation which, by a reciprocal exchange of wants, renders mankind necessary to each other, and which forms the bond of society. It is therefore the labor of the husbandman which gives the first movement. What his industry causes the earth to produce beyond his personal wants is the only fund for the wages, which all the other members of society receive in recompense for their toil. The latter, by availing themselves of the produce of this exchange to purchase in their turn the commodities of the husbandman, only return to him precisely what they have received. There is here a very essential difference between the two species of labor on which it is necessary to reflect, and to be well assured